Welcome to Out of Bounds and hello from the city of Irkutsk in Russia. Time to grab a snack and a drink because in this video, we travel by the Trans-Siberian Railway, one of the world's greatest engineering achievements, from here in the heart of Siberia all the way to the glistening coast on the Pacific Ocean. First founded in 1661 as a small outpost, Irkutsk evolved quickly into a commercial center for fur and gold. Later, many of the participants of the failed Decemberist uprising of 1825 were exiled to Irkutsk, bringing with them European cultural influences that gave the city its nickname, the Paris of Siberia. Today, Irkutsk is home to over 600,000 people, and it is a key industrial and transport center in the region. Irkutsk's historic city center is on the right bank to the east of the Angara River, but the train station is located on the opposite bank west of the river, as a rail bridge across the wide and turbulent Angara here would have been expensive. First opened in 1898, the Irkutsk Passagierski station went through several rounds of subsequent renovations and today features a striking light green and white exterior showcasing classical styles. After a security screening, we're inside the station. I'm making this trip in March, where outside temperature in Siberia still routinely goes below minus 10 degrees Celsius, but of course the station interior is nice and warm. We don't have too long to hang around here though, as it is time to board our train. There is a number of passenger services on the Trans-Siberian, including two pairs that run its entire length from Moscow to Vladivostok. One of them is the 001-002, also known as the Rossiya Express, Russia Railway's famous flagship service. We are, however, taking the 010N today, which is the other eastbound service down the Trans-Siberian. The two cover the 4,103-kilometer Irkutsk to Vladivostok section in almost the same amount of time, though the 002 would depart in the late evening while the 010N departs just before 9 in the morning, which works out better for my itinerary. Our train departs from platform 3 today. After a brief ID check, I'm aboard car 26, my home for the next 4 days and 3 nights. This is a Platzkart or open sleeper carriage. It is subdivided into 9 segments, with each segment having 4 regular couchette berths and 2 additional side berths parallel to the direction of travel. There is an additional third level, though thankfully they are used as storage racks and are not for passengers. Space is not the biggest here, but I like the atmosphere, and this train is not particularly full, so I do get to lounge on the lower side berths from time to time, which cleverly folds into chairs. At 8:59, train 010N departs Irkutsk station, beginning its run through the heart of Siberia and all the way to the shimmering Pacific Ocean. Prior to the construction of the Trans-Siberian Railway, Russian imperial couriers traversed the vast and unforgiving land using a network of horse-drawn coaches and postal stations. Today, these postal trains still carry on that tradition. Out of the station, we briefly run along the Angara River, which is the only outlet of the nearby Lake Baikal. With a maximum depth of over 1,600 meters, Lake Baikal is the deepest lake in the world and acts as a giant thermal reservoir, holding vast amounts of unfrozen liquid water under its icy surface no matter how cold it gets. The Angara siphons water from several meters below the icy surface where the temperature constantly remains above freezing, and it remains free-flowing around Irkutsk even during the most brutal Siberian winters. Meanwhile, on board the train, the attendant has come around and handed out the bed linens. They come in a sealed plastic bag, and passengers make their own beds. Once you're done, the plastic bag can even be tied to the table as a trash bag. My Platz cart lower berth is otherwise quite functional, with plenty of hooks and shelves for personal items and a charging outlet for each passenger. Although the Trans-Siberian Railway opened in 1904, the train is now traveling on a section that only became the main line in the 1950s. The original route here, known as the Baikal Railway, would have followed the left bank of the Angara to Lake Baikal, then turned west along the lakeshore. It was the most treacherous stretch of the whole Trans-Siberian Railway, with the tracks needing to negotiate deep ravines and sheer cliffs that drop hundreds of meters straight into Lake Baikal. Engineers and workers from all over Russia and many parts of the world endured unforgiving Siberian climate, primitive living conditions, and brutal physical labor to carve a path out of solid rock. Although the CBR was a better bypass across Lake Baikal than the even more inefficient icebreaker ferries used up to that point, it was still a bottleneck. So after World War II, a more direct transfer line through the mountains was upgraded and became the Trans-Siberian main line we are using now. With the construction of the massive Irkutsk hydroelectric power station in the 1950s, parts of CBR's original tracks became submerged beneath the rising waters. But the segment along the lakeshore remains an operational spur line, where visitors can relive this fascinating history. At 31,722 square kilometers, Lake Baikal is the world's 7th largest lake by surface area. It is formed by a continental rift, where tectonic plates slowly tear apart and form a deep chasm. With a maximum depth of over 1,600 meters, Lake Baikal is the deepest lake in the world and, famously, the world's largest freshwater reservoir, containing roughly 20% of the unfrozen freshwater on planet Earth, more than all of the North American Great Lakes combined. Indeed, while the surface is now covered with solid ice up to 1 or 2 meters thick, the lake is so exceptionally deep that the vast majority of its volume never freezes. In deeper parts of the lake, the pristine water remains around 4 degrees Celsius year-round. The freezing and thawing at the surface, however, does cause the temperature gradient of the lake to seasonally invert, leading to significant convection. This churns oxygen-rich water throughout the lake and allows life to thrive at incredible depths, making Lake Baikal one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in the world. The train is now coming into the town of Selenge near the very southern tip of Lake Baikal, where the Baikal Railway and the Trans-Siberian Main Line meet. The tracks will run very close to the lakeshore from here, offering some surreal views of the shimmering ice field. Constructed between 1902 and 1904, the Selenge 1 station building is designed by Italian architects and engineers that came to the region to assist with the tunnels and viaducts of the Baikal line. As such, the structure mimics a compact European fortress and is famous for its facade made of unpolished local marble. In front of the station is a statue of Mikhail Khilkov, the Russian transport minister when the Trans-Siberian first opened. Spanning a colossal 9,288 kilometers across the vast expanse of Eurasia, the Trans-Siberian Railway stands as the longest continuous rail line in the world. Its sheer magnitude mirrors the immense geography of Russia itself, cutting through 8 distinct time zones and crossing many major rivers, bridging Moscow and the Pacific port of Vladivostok. Traveling near a quarter of the globe's circumference, this monumental steel artery drastically improved the previously grueling travel conditions through the wilderness of Siberia, transforming this remote landscape and binding it with the Russian heartlands. The Trans-Siberian was of course not Russia's first railway project. As many railways were being constructed in Western Europe and the United States in the early 19th century, Russia was not far behind, building its first public railway, the 27-kilometer-long Tsarskoye Selo line between central St. Petersburg and the Tsar's Summer Palace in 1837. Not long after, the empire also built the much longer St. Petersburg-Moscow Railway, connecting Russia's 2 largest cities some 650 kilometers apart. Opened in 1851, the railway not only incorporated state-of-the-art technologies but also established the 5-foot or 1524mm broad gauge as the standard throughout the Russian Empire. The St. Petersburg-Moscow Railway is still one of the busiest lines in Russia today, and because its exceptionally straight alignment, its modern iteration can even handle high-speed trains, including the Sapsan, Russia Railway's fastest service with top speed of 250 kilometers per hour. In case anyone didn't know, tea is absolutely huge in Russian culture, and it is especially so on trains. People often bring cups with metal holders to enjoy hot tea on long rail journeys. I didn't have one of my own, but the train attendant was very kind and let me borrow one. I'll be making good use of it for the next few days. The train is now approaching Mysovaya station on the southern shore of Lake Baikal. Before the completion of the Circumbaikal Railway, 2 icebreaker ferries, built in pieces at Newcastle, UK and shipped to Lake Baikal for reassembly, hauled trains across the open waters. They would have unloaded their passengers and cargo at Mysovaya's original stone terminal here. Our train is slightly ahead of schedule, so we wait a bit here as a cargo train passes by in the other direction. As previously mentioned, early projects such as the St. Petersburg-Moscow Railway showed the potential promise of this new technology in Russia. As such, several preliminary plans for railways across its frontiers in Siberia were put forward by both commercial and military interests. Among these was the proposal by Nikolai Muravyev, the governor of eastern Siberia. A promoter of Russian imperial expansion, he is best known to have pressed the 1858 Treaty of Aigun on the Qing Empire of China, which led to the Russian acquisition of Amur River Basin and Primorye on the Pacific coast, also collectively known as Outer Manchuria. Ever aware of the military importance of railways, Muravyev advocated for a Trans-Siberian line to strengthen Russia's imperial holdings in the Far East. But TSR concepts remained on the drawing board for decades in the second half of 19th century, as the project faced not only financial and technical, but more importantly, political challenges. Governors and ministers continuously debated on how to manage Siberia. Would it just be a penal colony, or should the state invest more into commercial development? How would the state balance between settlers and indigenous local peoples? And moreover, should the government practice fiscal conservatism or be more ambitious and pursue faster industrialization? A series of wars in the late 19th century, such as the Russo-Turkish War of 1877-78 and the wars in Central Asia in the 1880s, further highlighted the military importance of the Iron Road to strategists in St. Petersburg. Although it would still take the brilliance of a visionary statesman to turn the pipe dream that is the Trans-Siberian into reality. It's lunchtime now, and let's head over to the dining car. The dining car itself is decorated with various shades of purple. There are a few box seats and the interior is quite pleasant. The menu is bilingual in Russian and English, and it's fine to pay by cash as the attendants have a fat stack of change. I got chicken with rice and veggies, which cost 580 Russian rubles. The train is now running near the Selenge River. This transnational river flows for about 1,000 kilometers from Mongolia into Lake Baikal in Russia. In Mongol traditions, Selenge is often considered the nurturing mother river of the steppes, as lush pastures along the Selenge and its tributaries sustained the nomadic way of life. In Siberian folklore, Selenge is personified as Lake Baikal's eldest son, who dutifully brings wealth into the family. This is indeed a pretty accurate representation of actual geography, as the Selenge, with a drainage basin of 447,000 square kilometers, contributes nearly half of the water that enters Lake Baikal. As the Selenge is prone to ice floods during the spring thaw, the rail bridge has massive foundations that protect its stone pillars. The Trans-Siberian Railway, one of the world's engineering wonders, came into being largely under the leadership of one Sergei Witte. Unlike the traditional aristocratic Tsarist elite, Witte was a self-made, pragmatic administrator. He actively promoted state-sponsored capitalism and advanced Russia's industrialization throughout his career. As Witte had prior experience in the railway industry, he became the main champion of Trans-Siberian Railway upon being appointed the finance minister in 1892, believing that the project would both spur domestic heavy industries while also help transport Siberian minerals to fuel this growth. Witte set up a committee, chaired by the Crown Prince and future Tsar Nicholas, that oversaw all aspects of the Trans-Siberian project. That meant that in addition to the actual railway construction, other areas such as waterway dredging, regional industrialization, and even migration policy all fell under the committee's purview. Indeed, the powerful committee came to effectively control the overall development of Siberia and a large part of Russian foreign policy at the time as well. The train is now stopping at Ulan-Ude station. Founded in 1661 as a Cossack winter camp at the confluence of Selenge and Uda rivers, Ulan-Ude developed into a center for trade and exchange, first as a nexus on the Tea Road between Russia and China, and later as an important railway junction. As this is a larger station, passengers can walk around the platform and even pick up some supplies from these shops. Here you can also see that this train consists of all manners of carriages. The older ones generally have more corrugated sides, as the ridges give additional resilience to the metal panels that must endure extreme temperature swings. Let's also have a look at our locomotive. This EP1P062 unit was manufactured in 2010 at the Novocherkassk electric locomotive plant. Its designed top speed is slightly lower at 120 km per hour in order to improve traction on steep gradients. Shortly after leaving Ulan-Ude station and crossing the Uda River, we passed a junction where the Trans-Mongolian Railway splits off. Completed in 1956 as an important branch of the Trans-Siberian system, the Trans-Mongolian extends 1,371 kilometers from here to the Mongolia-China border, where the train can travel onwards to Beijing after a break of gauge. In addition to passenger traffic, the line is also a major Eurasian freight corridor, especially as overland trade to and from China continues to expand. While the vast steppe sceneries may look idyllic, building an actual railway here is anything but. For starters, the open grasslands often did not offer readily available timber or stone needed for construction, so large amounts of basic materials had to be shipped in at great costs. Labor supply was also a constant issue, as in there were almost never enough local workers due to Siberia's low population density. Besides recruiting workers from Western Russia, the labor shortage was partially met by using exiled convicts. Working on the railway often led to a reduction in their sentence. This, together with relatively good pay, actually made the convicts productive workers.
Вот Новоильинский, да, все стоят. Так она даже двери не открывала.
Our train is now stopped at platform 2 of Petrovsky Zavod station. This town itself only has about 20,000 residents, but it does mean that we have crossed into a new time zone from UTC +8 to +9. As the train continues to roll east towards Chita and beyond, all times shown in the video are local times unless otherwise noted. Good morning from the Trans-Baikal region, where the sun is rising above the ridges on the second day of the journey. Overnight, we passed through the city of Chita, which has a historic train station dating back to the year 1900. We're also not too far from the junction where the Trans-Manchurian Railway split off from the Trans-Siberian main line. Better known as the China Eastern Railway, the line through northeastern China was once the Trans-Siberian main line and in fact the only route to the Pacific coast for many years in the early 20th century. This strange arrangement of Russian railway through Chinese territory is the result of both geography and politics. When surveys were first conducted on the easternmost parts of the Trans-Siberian, engineers considered two routes. One that looped around the newly established border with China and stayed entirely within Russian territory, and another that cut through northeastern China for a more direct route to the Pacific. As the first route traverses more mountainous terrain and adds a day to travel time, Russian planners gravitated toward the second option. While it may be awkward to have an ambitious foreign power build its critical rail link through your territory, China at the time faced a different kind of dilemma. The initial border between China and Russia had been stipulated in the 1689 Treaty of Nerchinsk, signed in fact not too far from the very tracks we're traveling on. By the late 19th century, large areas of outer Manchuria had been ceded to Russia. However, after China lost the First Sino-Japanese War in 1895, it had no choice but to court other imperialist powers to check further aggression by Japan. Therefore, in 1896, the Qing dynasty granted a concession for the China Eastern Railway through its territory as a risky strategy to invite Russian interests to the region and counter Japanese encroachment. Back in St. Petersburg, Russian officials had split opinions on the CER. Pragmatists such as Witte advocated for the line to remain a primarily commercial and peaceful enterprise, while more hawkish governors and generals saw the CER as an opportunity for Russia's own colonial expansion and military adventurism. Reality, as it often does, went the more hawkish route, with Russia actively expanding its sphere of influence in northeastern China after the CER's completion. However, Russian ambition in the area would soon be frustrated in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, when Imperial Japan again defeated Russia and took over the southern extension of the CER, blocking direct Russian rail access to the warm water ports of Port Arthur and Dalny. Today known as Lushun and Dalian respectively, they remain key ports of the modern Chinese Navy. The China Eastern Railway would continue to cause tensions among Russia, Japan, and China for many more years, until the Soviet Union finally transferred its full control to the People's Republic of China in 1952. The train is now coming into a stop at Chernyevsk-Zabaikalsk station. Let's get off and stretch our legs. In front of the station is a statue of Nikolai Chernyshevsky, an influential Russian socialist philosopher, from whom the settlement gets its name. This station also has a few shops next to the platforms. I'm picking up some snacks here as well.
Ну да, у меня безлимитный интернет во всей России. 500 минут.
Out the window, another train is pulling into the station. This is the 009 service, covering the exact same route but running in the opposite direction all the way to Moscow. Running through its entire route would take 6.5 days.
Ну, с тобой будут по сменам работать.
After being defeated by Japan in 1905, Russia decided to build the Amur Railway, which looped around northeastern China and ran entirely through Russian territory. This is, of course, to reduce dependence on the CER, which was more diplomatically sensitive and militarily precarious. The Amur Railway is the Trans-Siberian mainline we're traveling on now. Its route needed to maintain some distance from the border with China so as to have a buffer in case of military conflict, but still as far south as possible, since climate to the north rapidly becomes even harsher, and therefore the lands are less conducive to economic development. That being said, building the Amur Railway was still a bitter struggle against nature, and the line once again goes through challenging terrain with deep forest, deep mountains, and deep cold. Construction ran between 1907 to 1916. Almost as soon as the Amur Railway was completed, all of Russia was thrown into chaos by the revolution of 1917. The Trans-Siberian Railway became a battleground during the ensuing civil war, where factions ravaged through the country, causing large-scale suffering among the refugees. The Czechoslovak legions, originally fighting on the side of the Entente powers during World War I, began fighting Bolshevik forces as trust between the two sides broke down. The legionnaires quickly captured large stretches of the Trans-Siberian Railway and famously ran heavily armored trains up and down the line to fight off its enemies. On the Bolshevik side, the leader of the Red Army, Leon Trotsky, also used an armored train as his war headquarters and visited the front to inspect his troops and boost morale. The fighting led to the Siberian Intervention, in which foreign powers sent troops and large amounts of supplies to support the Legion and Whites via Vladivostok. They were hoping to move the supplies with the Trans-Siberian Railway, but the line was in a poor state of operation and also constantly raided, so these supplies never efficiently reached the White Army in the front.
Насколько поедет?
Может позже, может раньше, я не знаю, у них
The train is now stopped at the town of Mogocha, with a population of about 13,000 and an unforgiving climate. Our locomotive has changed to this EP1293 unit. Manufactured at Novocherkassk in 2006, it can go up to 140 kilometers per hour, though we will not reach that speed for the most part. I'm boarding the train close to the dining car so I can save myself a trip down the train's many carriages. The train is now pulling into a stop at Amazar station. Many settlements in the area were founded in conjunction with the construction of the railway, with main economic activities being resource extraction. In Amazar's case, it is logging and sawmilling. Later in the evening, the train makes a stop at Yerofey Pavlovich station, near the northernmost tracks of this journey. We are also close to China's very northernmost tip, and the railway runs less than 60 kilometers from the border. Here, the staff performs mandatory inspections while passengers, both human and non-human, get a chance to step outside. Good morning on day 3 of the trip as the train is stopped at the snow-covered Magdagachi station. We have rounded the northernmost portion of tracks and are now heading south for the rest of the journey. I am told by train attendant that there is apparently no shower available on board, which is kind of a shame as I've seen shower facilities on other long-distance Russian trains. Perhaps travelers on the 001, 002 Rossiya service will have better luck. Regardless, it's still important to stay as clean as possible on this long journey. Out the window, the frozen landscape is in fact rich in natural resources. As more mineral deposits were found and exploited, the Soviet authorities made significant improvements to the Trans-Siberian Railway. The investment paid off during World War II as the Soviet Union used the railway to quickly move military units from the Far East to the Western Front against the Nazis. Wartime allies again sent supplies to Vladivostok. This time, the Soviet Union utilized the TSR much more effectively to ship the supplies westward. Later in the war, the railway was also used to transport hundreds of thousands of German and Japanese POWs to labor camps, where many would perish. The train is now approaching Shimanovskaya station, where a Soviet-era Class L steam locomotive is preserved. In front of the station building is a statue of Vladimir Ivanovich Shimanovsky, a prominent railway engineer from whom the town gets its name. The statue is positioned as if he is always at his working post, greeting travelers and watching over the Trans-Siberian's traffic. As desolate as the sceneries may look outside, there is actually another railway that largely parallels our line a few hundred kilometers further north. In the post-World War II decades, the Soviet Union embarked on building the Baikal-Amur Main Line, or BAM, as a northern alternative to the Trans-Siberian. Its route runs north of Lake Baikal, then continues east roughly a few hundred kilometers north of the Trans-Siberian line, terminating at the port of Sovietskaya Gavan. The idea was to stimulate growth of the Siberian interior and strengthen logistical resilience. Much of the BAM was constructed by volunteers from Komsomol, the Communist Youth League. The line is technically impressive, having the longest tunnel in Russia and traversing large stretches of permafrost, notoriously difficult to build on. Still, the climate of the region is just way too harsh, and development along the BAM remains limited, at least for the time being. The train is now crossing the Zeya River. It is a tributary of the Amur River, or Heilongjiang, and joins the mainstream at the city of Blagoveshchensk, also known in China as Hailanpao. Time for lunch, and for this meal, I'll have an instant noodle from China that I bought a few days ago. These are indeed pretty convenient, as they even include a foldable plastic fork in the package. If you've traveled on Chinese trains, you'll know they're quite popular there. I did see a few people eating them on Russian trains too, but it doesn't seem to be as prevalent. The train is now passing Serishevo Station. In front of the station building is a statue of Stefan Serishev, a prominent Soviet military commander during the Russian Civil War, after whom the town and station are named. Not long after, we come into a stop at Belogorsk Station. On the other side of the platform is another 009 train going in the opposite direction toward Moscow. From Belogorsk, there is a spur line to Blagoveshchensk, though it does not cross the border.
Кое-что посмотреть и кое-что с кем встретиться.
This station also has platform shops, and I picked up a few tea bags. In front of the station building, there is a statue of Lenin. The back section of the train has been partially rebuilt. It now has a rail maintenance carriage attached at the end. This one specifically lubricates the tracks to reduce wear and noise. The carriage has a small bay window sticking out from the side, so onboard technicians can safely look down and inspect the tracks. A bit after 1600, the train makes a stop at Yekaterinoslawka station. The name comes from the historical Yekaterinoslav governorate, centered around the modern-day city of Dnipro in Ukraine, from where several families migrated here in the late 19th century. We're now making a stop at Zavitaya station. This town used to host an airbase for heavy bombers during the Cold War, though the regiment was disbanded in 1994. Soon after Bureya station, we cross a river also named Bureya. This is the first non-frozen river we have seen in a very long time. In the blue hour just after sunset, we come into Arkara station. This station is the boundary between the Trans-Baikal and Far Eastern divisions of Russian railways. As such, most long-distance trains make a stop here. After this station, the train will soon enter the Jewish Autonomous Oblast. Established by the Soviet Union on May 7, 1934, it is the world's first officially recognized Jewish territorial entity in modern history, predating the creation of Israel by 14 years. The government had hoped to attract Jewish settlers to this so-called Siberian Zion, but the location choice is, well, strange, to say the least. New arrivals were shocked by the remote territory's dense taiga, massive swamps, and brutal climate. Moreover, the land had absolutely no historical or cultural ties to Jewish heritage. It is no wonder the project did not work out, and today only about a couple thousand Jews remain in the oblast, accounting for roughly 1% of the population. We do cross into another time zone upon entering the JAO, and the local time in Obluchie station and beyond is now UTC plus 10. Late at night, the train stops at Khabarovsk, the largest city of Russian Far East. It is situated on the confluence of the Amur or Heilongjiang and Ussuri rivers, less than 30 kilometers away from the easternmost tip of China. Also known as Boli in China, the city's Russian name comes from Yerofey Pavlovich Khabarov, who led colonization efforts in the area in the 17th century. This city is home to the Khabarovsk Bridge across the Amur River, located just north of the train station. Opened in 1916, it is the site where the current Trans-Siberian mainline finally completed. Today, the massive bridge is commemorated on the back of the 5,000 ruble bill. Good morning on the fourth and final day of this journey. We are currently stopped at Bikin Station, only about 20 kilometers east of the border with China. The train has been running a bit late through the night, though it has mostly caught up by now. This area continues to have many rivers, but they're mostly frozen once again. Drinking hot tea while watching the snowy landscape go by is really quite a treat. By By the way, while the rail infrastructure we see today looks rather innocuous, it once harbored a deadly force. During the latter stages of the Cold War, the Soviet Union deployed rail-based mobile missile launch systems, a fleet of literal doomsday trains that could be rapidly mobilized across its vast rail network and fire nuclear ICBMs from the tracks. These trains integrated the missile and its launch pad, command and communication center, supplies, and living quarters for the soldiers in self-contained units that looked no different from ordinary trains from the outside. Even if a launch order came in while the train is moving, missiles could be launched in a matter of minutes. The trains patrolled up and down the Trans-Siberian through the end of the Cold War, though they were eventually decommissioned over the 1990s and 2000s. Our train is stopping at Ruzhino Station, where we get another chance to step outside. We're now in Spassk-Dalny, an industrial town known for cement production. It is located on flatlands near Lake Baikal, the largest lake of Northeast Asia. Straddling the Sino-Russian border, Lake Baikal is known for its remarkable biodiversity and also a key stopping point for migratory birds.
Хорошо, конечно. Я так... Я не то чтобы боялась, а просто ноги болят. Не поехала.
After passing through a few more snow-covered stations, we come up to the junction with a branch line to Pogranichny and Suifenhe. This was historically the eastern junction of the China Eastern Railway, and it is still an important rail border crossing between Russia Primorye and China. That means trains can technically go directly from Vladivostok into China. But unfortunately, as of making this video, no such international passenger service exists. We'll be taking a look at the awkward state of international rail travel here in another video. In the meantime, the train has come to a stop at Ussuriysk station. Also known as Shuangchengzi in China, the city of Ussuriysk is the second largest city in Primorye with around 180,000 residents. The Ussuriysk railway station is a beautifully preserved building with a striking turquoise exterior. In addition to the junction with China Eastern Railway just mentioned, there is another split in the rail line a bit further south beyond Baranovsky Station. One of the branches crosses the border into the city of Hunchun in China. Another branch crosses a rail bridge over Tumen River directly into North Korea. After days of watching the seemingly endless taiga blur past out the window, the wintry landscape suddenly breaks to reveal the shimmering expanse of the Pacific Ocean. We have now entered the northern outskirts of Vladivostok, which is also known as Haishenwai in China. Located in the extreme southeast of the Russian Far East, Vladivostok is geographically closer to the northern coast of Australia than it is to the Russian capital, Moscow. The railway will pass through a number of suburban stations while running largely along the coast for this last stretch. While the port of Vladivostok is sometimes referred to as a warm water port, the sea here is still partially frozen even in late March, and locals still casually walk out onto the ice to fish. In terms of commercial shipping though, the port does remain open year-round, thanks to active ice-breaking operations that smash open channels for navigation. The long structure in the distance is the Nisko-Vodny Bridge. Built as part of the preparation for the 2012 APEC summit, the bridge spans 4.4 kilometers across the Amur Bay, allowing some traffic to bypass the congested roadways near city center. After a few more minutes of shaking and rolling, the train finally arrives into platform 4 of Vladivostok station. We have covered the absolutely epic 4,103 kilometer journey in 78 hours, 3 minutes. A bit slow, but exactly on time. Our train is parked right next to the iconic 9288 monument, a symbolic milestone and a physical testament to the unrivaled scale of the Trans-Siberian Railway. A big thanks to all the conductors, engineers, crew, and maintenance staff that made this adventure possible. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed this grand rail journey from Siberia to the Pacific. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more travel and transit content. Have a great day, and see you in the next one.